All right, we're here with Tabor and Jake today. We're going to be speaking about Gnosticism, religion, perhaps economics, the family structure, the degeneration of the family structure, and society. So, welcome. Thanks for having me over.
Yeah, thanks for coming over.
Awesome.
Well, hell yeah!
Do you want to do like really brief introductions?
Yeah, so let's start with Tabor. Well, we met at the gym, and I kind of wanted to ask you, when we first started talking, I was talking about absurdism, and then how I'm interested in Gnosticism. You told me that you're self-proclaimed Gnostic, and also a member of the Universalist Church. So I just wanted to ask you sort of your evolution through spirituality throughout your life and how you ended up in this area.
Yeah, so basically I was raised in a primarily far-left, godless culture, and I basically had decided by the time I was 16 that I was an atheist, and I took on that worldview for a couple of years with lots of people challenging me to believe in God and spirituality because, New Age kind of spirituality was pretty popular at the time amongst millennials, and that's what I am. I'm a younger millennial. And yeah, I just remember kind of having to shift to being kind of agnostic, but into my early 20s, I was pretty staunchly against formal religion. I had issues with it, and I would still have a lot of issues with the institution of religion, but I can see why it exists a little bit more now after more experience. But yeah, basically what changed my life is I tried to commit suicide, and there was divine intervention. And basically I got a message in the attempt on my life from what I would consider the holy God, the divine. The message kind of was like, you're kind of foolish and you don't know enough yet, and you need to know more, and you need to be able to change your perspective from the sort of worldview I had at the time. I would have considered myself somebody who would have maybe been classified as a simulation nihilist. So I kind of have maintained a similar cosmological worldview in a lot of senses, but I've adapted my view to implement and incorporate spirituality where I was unwilling to before. So I kind of just thought everything was cold code lines, that there were infinite iterations of dualities, but they were just basically all false sense impressions, and we were basically in some sort of like matrix reality. I can understand how that sort of viewpoint isn't necessarily wrong in certain contexts, but I didn't believe that there was like a more overarching metaphysical structure to anything or any purpose. And that was, a very despairing worldview. So basically at the time, what convinced me to just take my life, or to try to, was that every emotionality, that I could ever derive into anything and out of anything was essentially, a mistake. And, whenever I recognize that there are greater essences beyond just these impressions, and that there are like realities, I kind of stepped out of existentialism, which I was unaware of at the time. I wasn't like a very intelligent student of philosophy. I was kind of bound to a certain worldview which would be popular amongst the people that I was raised around. I mean, we basically had a completely postmodern worldview, and no wonder why I couldn't understand a concept like essence precedes existence. that sort of idea of like more classical philosophy was just like really foreign to me, and I wouldn't consider myself an existentialist anymore, but an essentialist. But yeah, that goes into a bunch of things.
So you were like, you started out pure materialist, moved into believing, say, everything's a simulation and doesn't matter.
Yep.
Then at that point you transitioned from simulation to, say, Gnosticism, where there was this Demiurge created the universe, and this material reality is sort of evil.
It did take me a little longer to become a Gnostic, so I'd actually try to be a more traditional fundamentalist Christian in between that. But I knew of Gnosticism and things like that through being pretty involved in the truth movement. So I've been pretty hip to like conspiracy conscious topics ever since I was like 16. I was like the year that I would have considered myself red-pilled in like many regards. But yeah, like hearing about it from the Christian truthers and stuff online, they often spoke of Gnosticism like it was a bad thing. But I would notice that certain arguments that Gnostics made seemed legitimate, and I couldn't really deny their cosmological worldviews even as a fundamentalist. But I thought I was supposed to just reject these things because there must be something wrong with it. I mean, everybody else is saying that around me. Sometimes I would even meet people in the church who'd be like, yeah, and the Gnostics were bad because blah, 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 and look at what the early church fathers would say. And studying history and stuff was like really eye-opening for me, because I recognized that the original context of Christianity was Gnostic, and there's no denying it. I mean, it's not just in the Gospels, but it's also like in the Pauline epistles, and there's been a lot of shenanigans around orthodoxy, so I wouldn't sit there and make Catholics and Eastern Orthodox people feel really bad or anything, but they have been a bit fooled, I would say, from their trust in tradition. It's a little too trusting and not enough criticism is what I would say. But that's a whole journey in and of itself with lots of details. But personally, on my own spiritual journey, what convinced me of Gnosticism wasn't just the studies and the history, but just looking at things essentially.
Yep.
Right? Like, I mean, I can't deny, like, what I read in the scriptures and what I've experienced with my own eyes. So it's just kind of like more a personal experience that got me to the point to seeing that it's true, but then to also see that historically it was also this way, and that there's been a lot of shenanigans. It just further embedded me into seeing that there's legitimacy to the point of view, because it's like, if the original Christians would be considered Gnostic by essence, that's not a name that they chose for themselves. They chose to call themselves little Christs. They called themselves Christians. It took a while before that kind of stuck, but there needed to be a term, because it was kind of just like this mystical movement that happened all around the Mediterranean, where people understood that there has to be this kingship in a man. And it's kind of like we're supposed to identify with Christ. And I'm not like the Orthodox again in this way, that I believe that Jesus was an actual historical figure. I think everybody knew originally that this was a parabolic character if they were learned. And it was easy to make a story as if there's this person, which it's parabolic if you're learned, but for even the simpleton, for them to just take it at face value. And then as they grew toward knowledge, but then there were all these persecutions that happened, it seemed like both the Roman government institution as well as the and I think this is a very important distinction, the Judean government institution, that's not to be confused with Jewish, which is actually a further, like, later invention further down in history. What it means to be religiously Jewish and Judean, there might maybe some overlap, but these things were not the same. There were persecutions from both of those sorts of institutions. So yeah, it was kind of governmentally oppressed because it made people not necessarily live for worldly matters, you know? I mean, if you look at the Gospels, like, it tells you to get on a spiritual path. Like,
my kingdom is not of this world.
Yeah, how can a rich man enter the kingdom of heaven, you know, like things like this. It's trying to help you prioritize the things that truly matter. It's like what initially causes you to do something is what's put into question with Christianity. And, you know, you have to ask yourself if you're actually like a real Christian. And again, that would be a Gnostic Christian, but like, again, that's just contextualize against this like modern day church and what the church has been for since the oppression of the original faith. Very few people actually seem to get it anymore. If you look at like the way that people behave in churches and what they think is expected of them, they're often very misguided, unfortunately. They have a few things figured out, but it's like without the proper context, it just seems like this whole thing is unfortunately really perverse. And that's why I could continue on with these traditional doctrines that are false, like heaven or hell, or Jesus was a historical man, and all of these sorts of ideas. Like, these are the things that are actually here to confuse us and distort the message. And if you just take the layers back one at a time and finally get down to the core of it, it's like that's not the message at all. The message is the gospel, which means the good news over it's victory over sin, evil, and death. That's what it's news of victory over sin, evil, and death. And that's like we see those things materially, right? We see death, we see evil, we see transgressions, right? And yeah, it's those things are bound up with each other. Satan's whole role, the accuser, is what that translates into, is to inspire us into doing things uncleanly, so there's a judgment against us for them, because that's his whole purpose, right? He's the sort of like one that oversees all things that go wrong. He's the one who sees the balance tipped this way or that way, and he's counting on every penny, right? And every penny will be given back to him. He's a righteous judge. He's a useful agent in this cosmology. But unfortunately, it's like a wicked dynamic. It doesn't make him necessarily bad, like in the grand scheme of things, but the ways in which we deal with Satan and Satan deals with us is inextricable, and it is bad. So it's like the function of Satan and the form of Satan are two different things, I would say. But the Holy God has a different plan, and that's to make everything right. And that's, despite that being one count of things, there's this other thing that's balanced, where the scales are perfectly balanced. You see that with the symbol of the cross. Jesus is in the complete intersection between vertical and horizontal. Obviously, he's spatial. In all regards, all things are held together by me, something that we know that Jesus does. Jesus is also making a point when he says, like, the bread and the wine, like, this is me, right? This is my body. We're all members of his body. He indwells all things. I would say that Jesus is infinitely immanent and perfectly transcendental, right? And that's like the kind of way I think that we have to understand holiness. It's like Jesus is the divinity into man themselves. And anytime we're proper, we're acting righteously by holiness, in accordance with holiness, that's downstream from the Holy God. And it doesn't matter the extent in which it reaches out. It's by his grace that these things are even happening. And it's not my own, it's not anybody's name out here. It's something that is an emanation from the source, right? So we have to have this like sort of proper respect. Anyhow, that's just kind of a bit of bit of my worldview there. I definitely want to share the floor, but kind of want to give a little bit of context to how I think all this stuff works.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
We'll move on to you, Jake.
Okay. So I was raised pretty stereotypically Christian.
Okay.
Like church every Sunday kind
So like the
of
opposite.
deal. Yeah. And it was more routine. My parents were very like, I wouldn't say superficial is not the right word, but they never really dug like super deep into, it's like, what exactly is the purpose of all of this, and how does the Bible relate to the here and now and the present and the everyday? It was more just like the Bible stories in the Sunday school, and so I had a Christian foundation at least, which I think kind of buttressed my views later on. So after I moved out, it was like the first time I was living on my own, and I kind of had a crisis of faith, and I didn't really know what to believe in. And I was hearing a lot of different voices, either like, from the media or from people I would meet. And at the time, this is around like 2015 or 16-ish that I like really was struggling spiritually. And I don't know if you guys remember, but it was around that time there was a big push for like atheism.
Yeah.
It was like really heavily imbued in the media, and it was a lot of just like
Like
really,
with Richard Dawkins.
Yeah, exactly. And there's like that one really popular atheist YouTuber. I think his name was The Amazing Atheist or something. I don't know if you've heard of him, and he kind of like rose to popularity, and it was just like flagrant bashing of anything sacred and holy, and it kind of just like
IDW shit.
I don't know what that is.
Intellectual dark web.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And I was deriving a lot of my opinions and like my worldview from like the internet at the time. I was like really heavily into Reddit. I was like a stereotypical Redditor,
Yeah.
It was back when like the atheism subreddit was really like gaining traction, and it was always on the front page, and people would occasionally post like pretty convincing arguments about why Jesus isn't the actual or whatever, why Christianity isn't real, and it was always an attack on Christianity. Of course, that's kind of like the basis of atheism. Is it's like the enemy of only Christianity. Like, of course, they expand into other religions, but
Yeah.
that seems to be the case, at least in the West, where it's like atheists just want to attack Christianity.
Yeah, let me just butt in there just for a second. And I think the main reason for that is because Christianity is basically
It is the religion of the
you
West.
could say that, yeah, it's the only religion in the
Sure.
West, more or less.
Mhm.
You could, Judaism, Islam, I mean, those pale in comparison to
Sure.
Christianity and its impact on Western
Mhm.
society. So when these atheist movements spring up in the West, a lot of times it is against Christianity, and a lot of times that's also because atheists who become very, very intensified about these topics, they grew up with bad experiences with the church, so then become very hateful.
Yep.
But I mean, not to interrupt.
No, that's okay. And we can also discuss like
Yeah.
the current state of the church and how it's
Yeah.
kind of antithetical to it's like the church is always asking for like not a revolution, what's the word that I'm thinking of, a revival.
Oh,
A revival. And it's like the church has done its best to push young men out of it.
Yeah.
At least the modern church has. The modern like stereotypical Christian faith-based church. But we can get into that a little bit later. So yeah, I really struggled with I felt like my foundation was crumbling, and it kind of threw me into a depression for about 10 years. It was around like the 2015-16-ish time that I read Tolstoy's A Confession. I don't know if you've read that book, but
No, I haven't.
He explains his undergoing of his crisis of faith, and he was raised Orthodox. He was raised in the Orthodox Church, and he was expressing as he grew into his adolescence that his friends were falling to the wayside, and he wasn't really sure, and he was having questions, and basically he kind of just goes over how his faith was deconstructed and then ultimately reconstructed. But at the time, I was suffering so severely spiritually, and he actually like steelman's arguments against Christianity in order to later on, make the argument for it. But he does steelman the arguments for his what was ultimately his atheism. But there's a really good metaphor that he expressed in this book, and it's this idea that our existence, you can think of it as there's this pit or this abyss, and at the bottom of the abyss is like a dragon or some kind of creature or a beast, right? And that's death. And we're hanging onto a branch on the edge of this abyss or this cliff, whatever you want to refer to it as. And we're like slowly slipping, and we know that the beast, that death, is awaiting us at the bottom of this abyss. But on this branch is a honeycomb, like a bee's nest, a honeycomb, and we're like taking licks from the honey to like satiate our need to hang on to the branch, even though we know that death is awaiting us at the end. So we're hanging on for dear life, and it's this very like nihilistic view of how some, or I guess how nihilists see life. It's like, we're hanging on for the pleasure despite the fact that we know that death is awaiting us. And at the time I was so depressed, and I'm like, man, I'm not even like getting the pleasure part. I'm just hanging on to the branch, bro. And I'm just waiting to fall for the dragon to eat me. So it was pretty hard, man. It was hard for like, I would say a solid decade. And it was
like basically until now.
I would say, well, I'm 31. I know I look pretty young, so I'm 31. So this was, I would say, things kind of changed for me like 5 years ago. I lost a brother, unfortunately, which made me I had to really like rethink. At the time, I didn't know it at the time, but I really was focusing my life around outcomes, and that's kind of how I view life now, is like, what is the outcome? At the time, when I was so low, the only outcome that I could see was just like death awaiting me, and that it wasn't even a fear. It was just like we're doing all this and it ends, right?
Yeah.
So what's the point of waking up and doing all this and going to work and keeping the machine running day after day, and when you don't have anything supporting you foundationally, it's like it's hard, man. It's really difficult. But I've always been into theology and philosophy, and I kind of started reading like old alchemical texts, and that kind of like revived my spiritual flame in a sense. And I've always really liked like symbolism and like ancient pictures and texts. I feel like there's something really like spiritually primitive in those things. Even as a young kid, I used to draw the Eye of Horus. I was like really interested in the Eye of Horus, and I didn't know why at the time. I was like reading these old textbooks about like ancient Greece, and I loved mythology and stuff like that. I didn't know why. I think it's really deeply rooted into us to find some kind of higher order meaning out of those stories and those symbols. So yeah, I started reading these things again, and I was starting to pair the ideas of Gnosticism with Christianity and mysticism, and this idea of duality, and kind of there was a resurgence of like my Christian faith along with that, which really supported me. And you know, over the last like 5 years, it has been the case where I understand now with absolute certainty. It's like Carl Jung. Are you familiar with Jung?
Yep.
So in an interview, he's asked the question, "Do you believe in God?" And he says, I'm gonna get emotional because it's like, you know, he's asked the question, "Do you believe in God?" And he says, "I don't believe, I know." And you know, that's...
Because it's a direct experience.
Yeah. And if you, you know, you... Sorry, it's
okay.
It's just a lot. It gets me really emotional. But it's like, you see the outcomes of these people where the only thing they have is the here and now, and it's it's like Tabor's introduced me to so many people like through the Croc Center, and these guys are so broken, man, and it's, you know,
it's like they're stuck in this hedonistic lifestyle.
They're stuck, man, and it's like you think of the outcome, and it's like, you know, if you want to claim that there is no God, and you know, it's all just like the materialist rationalists just want to claim that you know, we're just blood and bone and there is no spirit. It's like, well, what's the outcome for you? Versus if you know and you have an understanding and you have this ability to change and catalyze growth within people, and it's like, you can't do that without something that is of a higher order. And so you have these guys that are completely without any kind of structure or basis, and you know, ultimately it leads to addiction, and it leads to depression and mental illness. And it's like, all you have to do is just look at the outcome, man. And
you will know them by their fruits.
Yeah, exactly. And so, you know, you can argue all you want on the materialist rationalist standpoint, but it's like, I don't know, man. It's like, my experience has been the case where this nihilism and the depression and you know, having like, it's almost like you're cut off from the source, and we can discuss like what the source is later on. But if you're cut off from the source, man, you're in death every day. And that's how it felt for me. I felt like I was already dead.
Living life as a dead man.
Yeah.
I would like to mention, just like as a biblical reference that kind of matches that. A lot of people, they'll read this parable in Matthew chapter 7 and they won't understand it. like at all, unfortunately. They don't understand the picture that's getting painted because, for one, they probably don't understand how Koine grammar, Koine is Greek, ancient Greek, like the Greek found in the Bible, that's Koine. And even modern Greek is not very different from Koine. It's very similar because that was the formal way you wrote in Greek. So they don't understand how the grammar and the context of how the language is often used. So basically, Jesus is like talking about the narrow way versus the broad way, and the narrow gate versus the broad gate. Okay, so if you think of a vineyard, okay, in the ancient world, especially that would have been popular in the Mediterranean, we're thinking dry climates. Basically, people would they would pay at a gate to properly go in to the vineyard to pick from it, and people didn't like have these perfectly manicured, pesticide, herbicide kind of experiences. These would be full of all kinds of plants, fruit-bearing plants that you want to pick from, and then also the fruits of the weeds around it, because they didn't go into these vineyards and just pick out the weeds all day. Like, it was foolish to do that. They just gated these things off and allowed people to go through. So you can imagine these little like sprawling, almost like human like rabbit trails through the vineyard, and you would go on the nice trail that's manicured from the people stepping on them, and you pick the fruits in their basket and you paid to do that, and you would leave with an appropriate amount of food for what you paid for out of the gate. But thieves would sometimes go in around the gate, the broad gate, right? They would not go through the proper passage where they paid properly to do it. What basically Jesus is saying is, you don't need to shake it up, and you shouldn't do the wrong thing anyway. You need to act of good character and just... he's not telling us to be complete conformists, but he's just like, you ought not cause yourself unnecessary troubles, because if you jump over the gate, guess what? They really don't weed right next to the edge, because they know that it's better to keep the nettles over there, basically, right? You're going to jump into the painful place to try to get to a good fruit. You're going to have to pass through all the thorns and the thistles. So this is what he's actually saying. And he's trying to make this bigger point of like character with this picture, right? And then he goes on to say, and this is why I believe in the doctrine of accordance. You are either holy or unholy at any given moment. You said, know them by their fruits. Are you sourced from what is holy and proper, or are you coming from the wrong place? This is the question. Are you coming from the right place or the wrong place? Because one thing's going to bring you good things, even if it's a longer process. You got to go through the narrow, winding, serpentine way to keep yourself from getting cut up unnecessarily. What are you going to do? So Jake is talking about these outcomes. We don't live for worldly outcomes, but if our worldly outcomes would reflect with good things, like self-preservation is a good thing. Not because we're just supposed to live arbitrarily to some end, right? But that along the way, if we're living in good character, we're going to be doing good things, and it compounds. We can see this in so many different parables in the Gospels, right? But he says, like, there will be some people who said that they've done things by my name, and I would say to them, I never knew you, because sometimes people are performatively good. Well, I know I'm supposed to appear good, but I'm not actually going from the right place. This isn't really for some true good end in a good person or in the community at large. If you're doing it for the wrong reasons, it doesn't matter its appearances. What matters is if it's actually good. So, I mean, one of the things that's so stressful sometimes is, as a person who serves other people around me, at times, man, I do want to give up on it because it's exhausting. to serve people, but it is for this like inevitably good end that I continue to bear with it, and it's not performative, you know. It's like when the disciples had very little to give, and Jesus is like, the throngs, they followed us. What are we to do with them, Jesus? Let's go over into the privacy and eat our food and rest. And he's like, no, we're going to feed them. We're going to bear with it, even though we're already weary. We don't have enough food to give. No worries. We're going to make it work. How much do we have? Oh, we have 5 loaves and 3 fish or whatever, and it's broken up somehow miraculously, right? To all these people, that's the sort of idea, is that what is truly good is it's an infinite depth, you know. We can just continue to find that holiness is going to always provide what it needs to. So it's not about what you're actually giving materially, it's like the intent behind it. So I think there's this call to like, it's sort of like virtue ethics and language, because it's a language pattern if we're a deontologist, a consequentialist, or a virtue ethicist. But ultimately, it's like, why does it use that sort of language? It's because it's trying to say, like, it's not about the things, nor is it just intent alone, like moral imperatives, always, never, things like this. It's rather like, you almost have to ask this qualifying question upon any given matter. And that's what the Gospels is often trying to help us understand. It's like, if we're to practice righteousness properly, what is it about, you know? And I think that's a really important thing. And this is what I think separates any mystical Christian I've ever met from a performative person in the church, because the institutions of churches, like that's why we almost act like it's this building, and we just go to this place and we have to check off this box. This is how the deontologist is thinking. Well, I'm supposed to do this because if I don't get perceived of doing things, it's just like Jesus criticized the fact that the Pharisees at the temple, they're like able to tithe all this money, but this lady, she's old and she doesn't even fit in there, but she still comes to give her offering, and she's giving out of her poverty. So she actually has a real cost here. And he's not trying to say like it's about the arbitrary thing of tithing. Jesus never called us to tithe, but he said if you're like doing something, it's not performative. And you would know them, again, by their fruits. What is causing a person to try to do the good thing? So it's not me holding the door open for all the families and the old people to come through. Say I go to church on a Sunday or something, right? It's not the gesture of holding the door, like my act of keeping the door on my hand. It's what's causing me to do it. That I know that this is some service, and that this is relinquishing somebody this burden, and I'm willing to take that on. What compels me to do that is something higher and greater, right? And this is what real goodness is, right? And it's not the collision of atoms. It's not about the material outcome. And I think that like, it's not just found in Christianity, obviously. Like you can read almost any old work or even new work of whatever throughout history, and you can find this stuff kind of everywhere, because God inspires people everywhere to act holy despite culture. But I find it strongly in Stoicism. One of my favorite quotes in Stoicism is to do something that is good, to build something that is good, the labor passes quickly, but the good endures. And to do something shameful in the pursuit of pleasure, the pleasure passes quickly, but the shame endures. Why are we bound to this sense of justice? It's something essential. It's deeply in our consciousness. It's not about the things we're dealing with. Just like substances themselves aren't anything but what they effectively do, and they represent what they are essentially, So why is it like that? It's not the things, it's not the form, it's something that is getting caused by it. So when we deal with like an alcoholic or somebody who's addicted to porn, we have to ask about the nature of what's going on here, and why is it convicting your consciousness in some way or another? What is the effect of it? Why is it doing what it's doing? Why does it have such a hold on you? And how are we to break this pattern out and be able to like get you to doing better things with your time that are going to actually cause you to feel fulfilled, right? Not because of, well, you're supposed to be this because everybody else does. It's not that sort of question. It's like, do you want to feel good, and do you want to be proud of something in fellowship, right? So it goes beyond egoism and altruism. It's something far more holistic. This is the gospel, right? And this is why we have to remember we don't just speak it. Like, it's not just a message. We don't just knock on people's doors and thump a Bible and say, you gotta believe in this mental position or else. This is all false doctrine. Real evangelism is in every act, every step. So long as you're acting in accordance with holiness, you're going to represent it. It's going to be holistic in you. It's going to be with every gesture that you do. Christ didn't just call us to speak. He didn't just call us to do. He called us to do all these things properly. And it's a mystical thing. What causes us to do it? He said this in one of the parables, right after the parable of the sower. I want to say it's maybe Mark chapter 6 or whatnot. Might be wrong about the reference. Somewhere between 5 and 8. Jesus is like, a man doesn't understand how the seed really comes to do its thing. He just plants, and then it grows and casts shade, and it does all these things, Like, this is the sort of thing, maybe it's Mark chapter 5. It's like you just do the thing, and it acts for your favor, right? Like, we harvest one day, we come with the sickle and we cut off what we need of it, right? That's what acting righteously is. It's like, for some reason, it intuitively just feels right, and we know it. We just work for it. We work for the goodness. We don't have to know every aspect of it. It's like in the Pauline epistles, we get the peace that surpasses all understanding. This is not about a formula, right? It's about inspiration, and the spirit of holiness is boundless, right? So there's this greater calling. Anyhow, so I just kind of wanted to offer a little bit of more insight. Speaking of Christian Gnosticism, it's like, how are we to contextualize what it is? And then, again, I do hold to a universalistic soteriology, which means, yes, not all just men are saved. Jesus is the savior of the world, the cosmos. So if we love the world materially, we're not loving, we're lovers of the world, and we love things of it. We're lusting after things, and that's going to be misguided. But Jesus so properly loved the world, all of it, in perfect completion, holistically, that he could give his only begotten Son. That's how the Holy Father did. The Savior of the cosmos. He's not just the Savior of things. Apokatastasis is one of the Koine words that means the restoration of all things, right? And this is a promise. He won't just reveal all things. He's going to restore all things. Not just materially, but to their proper telos, to their real end. What he made these things to be it's beyond the things themselves, And we have to understand that, like, Jesus isn't selectively choosing some to be better based off their merits. We have all been both good and evil. Doesn't matter the ratio. We all have the same need. Where we went wrong, we're blighted by sin. We need to be corrected. That disease makes us arrogant. It makes us prideful. It makes us foolish. And we need to be corrected in this. There's no one person that you can find in the world that is going to be a perfect example. There's not one thing that you can point to that's going to have a perfect statement on everything, but somehow we sort of behold the mystery of the gospel, and we just know, like, there really is justice, and there can be these, like, blessed words that we can hear, or we can see these correct gestures, and we just know something's right there, and it calls us to something higher. And it's not about redeeming the whole world while we're dealing with it. Indeed, just like Jake said, we're going to witness transgressions and death. We're always going to be caught up in this duality in this life, but somehow we know there's something bigger and better, and that's what it really means to be a Christian. So I don't tell people the gospel of fire insurance. Well, you gotta say Uncle Jesus as you're hanging on the precipice, because otherwise he won't pull you up. That's not the work of Christ. The work of Christ is that it is finished. It is done. It was already complete. And that's the mystery of the gospel. Why can we experience time and matter and go through all this witnessing all this iniquity in ourselves and each other and not have a final answer? So is the eschaton Jesus is coming back physically? And are we really to have these sort of prophecy fulfillment expectations? No, I don't think this is right. We're not waiting to see Jesus in the sky together. Mm-hmm. We need to witness that the kingdom of heaven is at hand. It's right now. It's within my grasp. And I need to, like clockwork, recognize it at every given moment and live this thing up and represent it. Because Jesus's return is when I recognize holiness again. I have metanoia, a full comprehensive change of my mind, right? And I recognize the truth again, and I go, oh my God, I've been in iniquity, like a prodigal son. I need to go back to the Father. My head's been in the pig slop. How did I end up looking at that girl's butt at the gym again? I got caught off guard. I need to go back to righteousness now, right? And what does he always do? He has open arms for me. That's the gospel. So, yeah, I am a universalist, right? And I think that is the real context of the gospel. And I think that you have to choose God, or God has chose some but not others, or any of this stuff. These are all, again, false doctrines that I think, unfortunately, again, this perverse condition of the false mind of things, where people are constraining the extents of God, again, who's boundless, and they want to make him into something small, something that they can control. Instead, if you recognize any pattern of my respect for God, it's that I can recognize what he is from a point of view, from a perspective, but he goes way beyond my vantage. But I do recognize him for his nature. Whereas if you look at other people, if I choose God, then I'm more powerful because he's not beyond my periphery. He's something that I can isolate under a microscope because my will is higher than his will. Or if he chooses me and not others, then that's a vindictive God that is selective, and that is far too much more like Satan.
Yeah,
right?
And that worldview is precisely why atheism exists in the modern day, because you have all these
errors,
priests and preachers basically taking God and converting him into basically the sky daddy who created the universe. He's a man, right? Because it goes back to Genesis, where God created man in his own image, but what that image exactly is what stems out to be people saying that image is a man, God is a man, and he created us in his image, where instead that image is actually light, and he created us in his own image because we are that light, right? And going through my childhood, right, I was an atheist basically my whole childhood. Like from the time I was like in 5th grade, like onward, until recently. But my main thing was, I can't believe in a man in the sky, magic man in the sky who created the universe. This sounds ridiculous to me. And I'm hearing all these stories in the Bible. I'm like, that can't happen. That can't happen. That's impossible. That's impossible, right? But it's like the reason being is that they're taking all these stories and they're basically erasing all the meaning, erasing all the power from it by putting it in this box where it's just, oh, this is a history book. No, this isn't a history book. Mm-hmm. This right here is a book of meaning and power, right? Amen. And that's why it's not this, like, you can't just like, oh yeah, this is the same thing as reading my 5th grade history book. No, it's not. It's not the same thing, right?
It's so obviously not.
Yeah.
But that's the error that so many people, they're acting like, oh, like since modernity we have this high view of science. Mm-hmm. We've been scientific forever. Humans are just bound to be that way. But we have a very specific idea of what science is supposed to be. There may be a few schools of thought right now, but we have these ideas where we really pedestalized it. And then we look at the Bible, which is like this much more mystical conglomeration of a ton of books. It's not even supposed to be just one book. It's just that we buy a collection of books, and people have said that they are supposed to canonically combine. The investigation into the Bible is a far more interesting thing than just taking it at its face value. Unfortunately, again, the institution of the church is like, you're supposed to believe this is inerrant from cover to cover, and you ought to just read it, Genesis to Revelation, every single year. And they create all these arbitrary standards for people, and they don't tell people like how to approach it. They just tell them to approach it, and they must. And they give them this moral imperative, and they say, believe in every word and believe its history and all these expectations. Instead of letting people sort of look at it and put on different lenses and see it in different focuses, they're like, no, you must see it this way. I'm going to teach you to see it this way, instead of saying, try seeing it this way and tell me what you think. And let's have let's grow together. I mean, I might tell people to constrain themselves away from certain things because I do believe there are certain common errors. But I also don't want to necessarily keep the child from maybe making that error if that's what they're going to do, because I think they'll learn from it if we made sure it was natural, but that there must be challenge. This is an academic thing. At the end of the day, whenever somebody's going to say, well, I'm reading this out of the Bible, then I say, well, why do you think that? And how does that get compared to this, right? Mm-hmm. We need to be, Socratic here. We have to get into the minutia of things and be like, well, why this? And can I intellectually try to see if I can just butcher this thing down and break it down? And maybe we have some real raw parts we can use here, but we removed the things that were weighing down the process from really being helpful, and that's something that I think that like real Bible studies should do, is like get into the minutia. But most of the time it's somebody in leadership who's just trying to make sure, hey, we're all on the same page, right, guys?
I'm trying to save you from hell. Yeah. The flames of hell.
Say Uncle Jesus, right, guys?
Yeah, I think there are 2 fatal errors that the modern church continues to reproduce. And that is, first of all, the church is more of a theatrical performance than it is a dissemination of theosophical information. So you go to church and you have a singular person speaking to the audience, and there is no discussion happening.
Yeah.
So when I have discussions like this, it's way more. I can integrate these discussions much more deeply, and I can kind of like chew them up and digest them rather than someone speaking at me from a pulpit.
Yeah.
Going over, and we can discuss like the cycle of things and how we're caught up in these cycles of doing things. And the church is just it has become a cycle. It's something that you do on Sunday, and it's the same regurgitation of the same stories over and over, and there's no actual discussion. How are we breaking these down, and what are your different viewpoints? And I think it's what's led to the the slicing up of the church into different denominations, because it's you have a singular person from the pulpit expressing their ideas of what this means.
You still have boomers going to Sunday school.
Yeah, man, and it's like if we got all these churches together and split up into small groups, even if they were of different denominations within the group, maybe we could find some common ground on things, and maybe we could disseminate the truth of what is being expressed in the Bible. And I think the second error of the church is that these stories that they're telling us, they don't give us a means of integrating them. I think it is important to take these stories and integrate them into our lives. What is the practical application of these things? What is the allegory? What is the metaphor of what this means? And I think the metaphor of Christ can be applicable to anyone, regardless of if you believe in him as a historical figure, or even if you believe in the Bible to any degree. If you see Christ as a representation of bearing your cross and personal responsibility and self-sacrifice, and what is the like Tabor was saying, in order to accord with holiness, it's like there is sacrifice to be made. You have to set something on fire in your life in order to accord with holiness. There has to be some kind of sacrifice. And that's like the whole allegory of Christ.
All things are trade-offs.
There's always a trade-off. You cannot have it both ways. That's why you cannot be lukewarm, as it says. You're either hot, you're either scalding, or you're cold. If you're lukewarm, I spit you out of my mouth. So it's like how do you take the parable of Christ, which is just a singular instance in the Bible, arguably the most important, but it's a singular instance of this incredibly important text. So you take the instance of Christ in the Bible and you say, okay, so God himself had to sacrifice something,
So unfortunately, we actually got cut off at this point, but we quickly realized that about 10 minutes after it cut off, and then we started recording again. Now, in this intermission period, please, I present to you a poem by Tabor. Thank you, and we'll get back to the show shortly after this.
Forget about their propaganda. Time to take a proper gander. Pedos making children pandas. Clandestine ends clamped in cancers. Sights are shuttered, lack of witness. Pouty privileged, proudly pampered. Others viewing reluctant fitness. Amused to spectate little scampers. Dirty laundered, not in hampers. Flirting cash eyes, greens and blues. Norby neighbors, flaky Flanders. The old ways outed for new social standards. Get abused, entertainment has no use. Subjective values, many views. Soundly stupid, slamming snooze. Lacking action, why we lose. Don't you grovel, don't you pander. Clean your kin from all the dander. Upended nails, get the hammer. Naval gavels, purchase pounders. Arguments are clearly countered. Stave the danger, purge the scum. Storied speeches, real encounters. Ship the bruised gin and rum. Around the pyre, cheers and beers. Crumbles creaking in the dumbs. Unearthing several fears. Slaves to spirits, wine and crumb. Bread is dead, skin is numb. Look upon your ghastly peers. Under archonic thumbs, arbitration upon your ears. We're in awake, we are the wares. City to sea, port to town, capacities, loads to layers, capacitors to the grounds. Shrieking cries and soaking sounds, no investment in worldly cares. Engage with the verbs, observe the nouns. To wicked works we are the heirs. Divine stalks, gnarled roots, chosen children laying bare. Trapped in tinsel, spiffy spoofs. Sycophantic samsara snares. Gravity has us trade our breath for shares. Seeking splendor, spoken spares. Dauntless deeds, doting dares. Primal urges, spooks and scares. Tails wag the beasts. The coldest are in heat. Murders up in the street. Bones upheld from the feet. Beside the nation are astounded. No apolitical posts. The dogs we chase as we're hounded. All apologetic notes. Justice is quite unfounded.
unfounded? Are we not already hungry ghosts? Around the vapor voices sounded. Silence glories, baseless boasts. If you're feeding on your slap and slander, you know you really need to stop. I don't believe in vigilantes. I'm never gonna call the cops. No justice can be enacted. We're making rent in half the shop. Laws amended, claims redacted. What we need is meat and crops. Edge the blade and ink the pen. Stop the writing made of blood. A call to arms is only when blood and soil, drills and mud. Fighting fiercely are the chuds. Nursing mothers and children don't simply depend on the studs. Firm foundations call them spin. Looking at the mess we're in, we're all in it all together. Coded calls, dump the bins, fleeced arms wrapped in leather, eternally recur. Rehearse the worst, set your heart against a feather. Ouroboros, endless curse. Transfer credits, transfers hers. Petty parameters hardly defend. Not all that concerned with our sins. It's an endeavor to prevent acts that can't be reversed. Merlin magic, trend so tragic. Teases titans, merely mocked. Banks and bleeding, peeping pageants. Attention drifting, grifting tangents. Awake from sleep, your heads and slop. Little steps before you hop. We can take a bit from off the top. Scopes that glimmer, take a drop. I speak it real, I don't pretend. Better bring out all your honor. Don't you see the mess we're in? Can't reflect if you do not ponder. Lick the Lucian, lose your mind. Off the cliff the blind, lead the blind. So sublime, so surreal. We desperately want to heal.
So it seems like the issues that we've been kind of mainly talking about have been with like the institution of church and how oftentimes it's performative and theatrical, and there were different points that we were making about that. Like one of the points that it looks like we might have lost here was basically you step in to an environment where you're getting entertained, and we're actually talking about like the supposedly the deepest issues in cosmology and the condition of mankind. And here we're going to just sort of formulaically make sure that we're crunching it down to this sort of time frame, and we got to make sure that it's sort of commercialized, right? Oh, they got their pragmatic expectations, and it's more conformed to the standpoint of the culture we're in. Now, I'm actually half ethnically Jewish, right? And I've studied Judaism. I think, like, I'm not a Sabbath keeper. I don't have a day of rest. I don't believe that that's what rest is about. It's like giving my entire day to being sure that I lawfully am abiding in a specific way, or otherwise I'm like transgressing God, and I'm supposed to have this performative, ritualistic respect to God. I do think that the intent of the Sabbath, though, does sometimes have a kind of interesting insight. I think it's become perverse, and I actually think that Christianity, if people are studying the New Testament, you can see Jesus actually criticizing the traditions of men so much when he talks about what is the spirit of the intent for the Sabbath versus what it's become. He criticizes it many times over.
It says God doesn't need the Sabbath, we do, right?
Right. He said that God made the Sabbath for man, not for man for the Sabbath, right? He's trying to say that there is a direction and a priorities here. And he said, like, if you had to do something that might be considered work, it doesn't matter what your oral law says, right? Before the Talmud was written, people were basically operating in the Babylonian Talmud, and that's what the Pharisees were doing and stuff. And again, I think there's a context here. I wouldn't call it Jewish, but I would call it Judean. There's a lot to say there, and maybe at some point we can get a little bit into my historical views, but yeah, Jesus was trying to say that, like, there's an intent there. But wouldn't it be great if I was to respect the idea of a rest day, right? Mm-hmm. That I would use that day to, like, honor so many things. And if I needed to do something, if I needed to work at something, right? Like, open my ears to a longer period of time to have an actual ministry. One of the things I was making a point of before the last recording got cut off was we don't see Jesus modeling this sort of cookie cutter, arbitrary, generic experience that people have at church today. We saw Jesus ministering to individuals and to crowds appropriate to the context. He looked at things as they were and heard what was coming at him and thought about what he needed to say. And that's what we see modeled in the Gospels. So we see again this sort of like virtue ethics in Christ. It's got to be this way or that way. It's not about, well, we are trying to do the greatest good for the greatest number. There's no consequentialism. Nor is it, we have this moral imperative that we have to respect everybody's schedules. No, he dealt with things appropriate to what they were, like situationally. And that is like recognizing virtue. Of course we have pragmatic considerations and stuff. Not everybody can bear with it all. That person was meant to leave. They're probably to go on their way. They're supposed to trust the process, just like the Roman centurion. I tell my men to go this way or that way, and they just do, right? Because they're following intuition. They're following a sense of order, right? And that's why he had faith, and that's why Jesus said, in all of Israel, I've not seen anyone such as you, right? And I think Jesus was speaking very inclusively there when he said that. He was saying that he is of Israel, but he is set apart from a standpoint of nationalism because he is just so faithful. Again, as Jesus is trying to say, there's a higher thing than a reference, right? So like we have all these systems of organization, but what's more important is the character, what inspires the person. We see again, this is this point that I've been making about the gospel. What is inspiring you is ultimately the thing that matters, the accordance you have with holiness or unholiness. I think it's so unfortunate that people can read the entirety of, say, the canonical gospels, right? The 4 that we find, and they just don't seem to like get it, you know? Like they can't tie it all together somehow. It's always like they're like, well, this passage refers to this eschatological doctrine of mine that I need everybody to believe in. What I was hearing Greg say is like, here at the church, like for example, Lake City here in Coeur d'Alene, they're like, we're going to quickly go over the fact that everybody has this sin condition and that they need salvation for it, for very young children. Not something that's actually like approachable to them. Like from a grammatical standpoint, children are maybe like prone to learning things physically, and when it comes to language, prepositionally. So it'd be like the things that are direct to visceral experience. They're not going to understand deeply psychological concepts. It takes them until they're like 10 before that stuff really starts to set in a big way. Until like that's just how development works, right? So they're going to understand over, around, under, things that have to do with their like body and movements, maybe smells and like sight and things that are more sensorial. You're going to have to like appeal to those faculties of a kid. But no, we're going to just try to compound these really big ideas into a kid, and like what is that really doing for them, right? And then it's almost like they're just doing it for the adults that are there. Well, I need to see that my kids are learning about the condition of sin and that they're going to go to hell if they don't say, Uncle Jesus. I need them to pray tonight by their bedside, right? And if I don't see my children praying, they're going to get spankings, or like, I'm not going to give them dessert or allowance. It's like it's more for the parents and the grandparents that are there, that they're teaching them like these Sunday school doctrines. It's again, it's so performative. And again, if we were to really think about things situationally, circumstantially, if we were to really be imbued with the gospel, we'd be using our intuition. In my own Bible studies, because I've led them, I've made this big point that like, we are called to an intuitive faith. It is not this formulaic thing. It is so intuitive. You can know on your heart what you're supposed to do at any given moment, and you also, in your heart, you can know your way out of any trouble. And it's like, it's weird, like that infinitesimally small degree of knowledge that we can't really isolate. Somehow, it's like as soon as you pass the threshold, it works out for you. You gotta trust the process. And that's just a really big point. I could say more, but I just figured I'd kind of bring it into a general point here that I think we're kind of speaking around.
And that's the whole concept of Gnosticism. It's the knowing. That's where the word Gnostic comes from. It's this like really deeply rooted intuition that I believe we do all have. And you know, I had this conversation with Tabor a long time ago. I don't know if you remember this, but I was trying to understand, like, why do some people get it and why do some people not? And how do you get through to some of these people? Like, I will meet people in passing where it's almost like this glass barrier between us. And it's like, I can't even have these conversations with you because there's literally no concept like inside of you or a willingness to want to know these things
because they're trapped in the material world.
You could say that, yeah, and it gets to a point where you can you can discern these people by just
their presence,
by their presence, by the look in their eyes. It's like kind of like this glazed over look. And if you meet people that kind of have this, even if they don't know it, even if they don't really represent this idea, it's like you still know there's like at least a way that you can get through to them and you can have these kind of discussions. Otherwise, it's like, bro, it's like I'm literally like, I hate to use like NPC because I think it's a little bit dehumanizing,
yeah.
but really, it's like if you're really rooted in the material and you're rooted in the world very deeply and you don't want to let go, it's like, bro, like that's the best word I can use. It's like you're a non-playable character, bro, and there's no amount of interfacing with you that I'm going to be able to get through to you the importance of these messages. And they don't want to hear it anyway, you know? I think some people do. I think there are people that recognize that there is no end to the hedonic treadmill, and, you know, maybe they've experienced everything already and they're trying to look for something different, but it's like, you've met the guys who are like, all they want to do is go find women and make money, and it's like that is the end for them. Like, they don't want to participate in anything else. Anything that has any connotation of spirituality is impermissible for them. Like, they don't want to hear it. And so it's like you wonder about this idea of free will and whether was it the condition of my upbringing that allowed me to experience these things? Was it the things that I went through? Was it the suffering that I had to endure that kind of like ignited this inside of me? And I don't have an answer to that, really, but I do believe that everyone does have something very deeply intrinsically they want to know what the truth is, like the truth, the capital T truth.
Right.
But
there's like a catalyst to seeing that even though we might be having different first principles and different ontological like trajectories with like the way we think things are supposed to be like bound up, like, oh, well, this is like kind of downstream of this, and like somebody's first principles will like be their like lens of how they're seeing things. If so long as you know that you're having an open discussion with somebody, it's so important for me to meet people where they're at before I expect them to meet me where I'm at, or even meet in the middle, right? It's like if I'm talking with an atheist or like a Hindu or somebody from like a very different culture, I'm going to take a lot of time to understand what they're saying as best as I can understand what they are trying to tell me. And if I think that their principles are wrong, and I can kind of tell, like, maybe they're right up to a point, but I think that they're ultimately too constrained, or they're misguided, or they think that this is overly important or something, and I think they're missing something that has actually been a huge catalyst for me to really see things in a bigger way, I will take some time to actually challenge in an appropriate way, so long as I can tell I'm having that open discussion with them. If they are too busy coming from here to there, it is not the time to have a discussion with them, because they're not present for it. But I do think that there's like a moment where I can see in an open discussion that opportunity to really plant a seed, because they might not acknowledge it today, but they often will come tomorrow or a month later and say, wow, that was interesting, or you got me thinking, or whatever. I'd never really put it on like that, and now I kind of understand a little bit more what you were saying. And that, to me, is how I see people spiritually growing. So, like, the gospel isn't just one acknowledgement. It's a thing that is beyond the acknowledgement, that does present people like the actual acknowledgements that they need to have to be more integrated to gnosis, right? To salvation, to understanding. Like, salvation fully is one thing, and salvation partially is another. 1 Corinthians 13 is a part of the Bible where Paul's like, all these things in parts. That's what it is to be in duality. All these things in parts, but God is all these things in full. And we are going to share all these things in full with him, but we have to at least recognize them in part, and we have to respect that we're doing them in part, and be proud that God has inspired us from his fullness for us to have them in part, for we're all members of his body. Like, this is the implication here, right? We're all parts of his church, right? His building, his bride is composed of all this, and we're ultimately married to him, right? That's why we're his bride. So we're one flesh, right? So we have to recognize that there's this like sense of separation that we're contending with in duality, but this fullness. So how are we to be effective with somebody is to witness, are they present with us, and can we find some medium of context where we're speaking with each other? I could probably come up with examples of somebody being off on first principles. Maybe, for example, like the empiricist maybe is like so focused on posteriori truth, and the rationalist might be so focused on a priori truth. And I think both empiricism and rationalism are kind of inextricable, and I can say that they are kind of bound up. Like, we have consciousness and we have things to observe, and like some things are like just structural, and it's so important to recognize that like these things are kind of bound up. I might say rationalism is a bit stronger when it comes to metaphysical things, but I would say for like making a structure or something, empiricism is going to be more applicable, or like inductive reasoning versus deductive reasoning. These things they're useful in their own place, right? Mm-hmm. So I guess it's like you want to throw a bone, but you also want to expand the person's viewpoint to being like, that might be appropriate here, but when does it not remain appropriate anymore? And I think that's like, when I've noticed atheists complain, sometimes they're like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. They go and poison the well, instead of like getting to a point where it's like you can say, hey, I can acknowledge that you're right about this, but that's not the actual problem. You're saying a lesser problem. We have bigger fish to fry. And now I can be a believer. I actually believe in God. I would say, I know God is real because I've experienced God. Believe me when I say I used to not believe in God, and I tried to kill myself because of it. Right? That was what I lived. But in that act, God came through for me. And I understand he doesn't do it for everyone. And it is not to say I'm special. It was just a special moment for me. But it wasn't that I'm better than anybody else. So we have to understand that like the essence of the issue is different. And like I don't know. It's like if they want to complain about some of the issues, it's like, what are you really complaining about? And you have to sometimes qualify this. It's like this, like whenever I like debate with feminists at rallies or anything at this point in my political walk, right? I have to ask them, okay, and what will that do? And what will that do? And what will that end up resulting in? And why can be compelled to even do this in the first place? And you have to like bring them through the series of questions to get them to the point that they maybe see that there's some errors in there, and then they're like, oh, maybe I have to like go back to trying to steelman this. And if I cannot create like an efficient system here, maybe this doesn't work, and I'm going to have to re-examine what my real values are. And then I also have to say, well, why not this though? What's so problematic with this thing that maybe is a bit more traditional, that has worked, that you're railing against unnecessarily? Why can't that also exist? Like, you'll have all these issues, talk about the anti-family stuff a little bit, right? Like, feminism is so often, I used to consider myself a male feminist, for people to understand. I was far left for a really long time. I would have called myself a male feminist, and I was pretty anti-natalist and anti-family. And I would have agreed with so many points that I see people at the time, because I thought I was supposed to be this thing. But it's funny, like, you can kind of cut off a feminist from the fact that she will support only women going against the family in certain contexts. This is what their brand of feminism is. Well, I only want to be sure that women are doing this, but it's like, well, what about the women that want a family? Why don't you support them staying with a husband? Why do they have to divorce? Because I see there's these calls, these imperatives that feminists are calling. Well, you shouldn't be with him, and he shouldn't have the power, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like more about this like misandrism, instead of like actually caring about the benefit of the woman or something. And it's like, are you even a feminist? Like, what is why are you even amongst feminists? You're just a misandrist,
And you can't have any feminists if there aren't any people.
Right. Yeah. You can just, from so many different levels, you can cut them off at the root and get to the heart of the issue and figure out who you're really talking with and what is the real matter at hand here. What are we really talking about? These qualifying questions. And it's going to be circumstantial, but get to the heart of the issue. Every single conversation you have, really be present for it. And you'll notice so often you can actually get to appeal to that higher consciousness in someone. But at other times, some people are just taken by, well, I got my pragmatic needs, and other times the program just has them. Even amongst people who are so generally blessed and holy around me, how many times I've been amongst them, and they are people that are so often good, and they are like suffering something so bad. It's not even just I see a glaze over them. It's like I see a darkness shrouding them. And I'm like, you're taken by the program. I'm not even reasoning with the person here. Like, where are you at? Where's my friend? Like, you're not there. I'm talking the cold code lines right now. The thief has you,
Yeah.
And that's a scary moment. And like, it happens to all of us. Like, there are moments where every single one of us finds ourselves off base and we're not in the game, right?
Yeah, that happens to me all the time.
Yeah. And that's the other thing. Uncleanliness is something that can happen for durations. What we have to remember is repentance isn't a call to agency as much as like it's a call to be according with the agent. So I want to make a point of this just because I think this is a really important doctrine. In Mark chapter 3, a lot of people misunderstand this as well. Jesus had a house divided, is what it's often called, and then there's the other section that's an unpardonable sin. I think that's a really terrible headline of that section, but I'll just read it all out real quick.
Yeah, go for it.
This is, I don't study just one Bible, but I'm just reading from the Berean Study Bible.
Okay.
Then Jesus went home, and once again a crowd gathered, and he and his disciples could not even eat. When his family heard about this, they went out to take custody of Jesus, saying, he is out of his mind. And the scribes who had come down from Jerusalem were saying, he is possessed by Beelzebub, and by the prince of the demons he drives out demons. So Jesus calls them together and began to speak to them in parables. How can Satan drive out Satan? Or the accuser drive out the accuser, if I'm to translate what Satan means. If a kingdom is divided against itself, it cannot stand. If a house is divided against itself, it cannot stand. If Satan is divided and rises against himself, he cannot stand. His end has come. Indeed, no one can enter a strong man's house to steal his possessions unless he first ties up the strong man. Then he can plunder his house. Now, what I want to say about this is that Satan is like, on one hand we could say that Jesus was actually the serpent in the garden. On the other hand, we can say Satan. I think both perspectives need to be applied.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Why is so often Satan considered serpentine? I think the symbol, the Ouroboros, is really powerful to understand the nature of Satan. Think of the cycle of entropy, things to dust and then things forming into something out of dust, right? Like this is the sort of thing of materiality, right? You just see duality, like inextricable and amongst itself. It's just this recycling thing here, right? That is such a satanic thing about materiality. Satan refashions these things. He's not the creator, he's not the source of how things are, but he is a designer. All deception comes from Satan. So this is the real idea, is that Satan is infinitesimally particular, whereas Jesus is perfectly universal, right? So therefore Satan is divided, and this is what he's trying to say. He says you can't really win being wrong, but I'm doing it by authority. So he's trying to imply that Satan really cannot be anything but what he is. So if there was an appearance that Satan was removing himself, it's still just Satan. But if I actually remove somebody out, like a demonic energy, right, which is as if it's conscious. I don't believe it really is. I think of it almost like a program, like you're just replicating lines and stuff. We could even make a point of that by looking at the Legion parable as well, but I won't go there right now. What he says though is, but the opposite is also true with uncleanliness. So Jesus is the strong man in the house. He's the actual operator, the real agent. But if he's tied up, then the thief is running the house and plundering. So we are either being taken from, or we have a house in proper operation. And that's what he's saying there. And then he goes on, and these sections are separated in so many Bibles, but I think it's really important to understand them in context with each other. He says, truly I tell you, the sons of men will be forgiven all sins and all blasphemies, as many as they utter. But whoever, and he's talking of times right now, because the word often gets translated to eternal. It is not eternal. That's not what the word for age in Greek is. It is not eternal. It might be like age enduring, but the word is anonios or anonion or whatever rendering of it, anon. Whoever blasphemes against the Holy Spirit will not be forgiven. It's more like he's not of forgiveness is really what the Greek is saying. For he is guilty of an age-enduring sin. And the idea is while you do wrong, you are wrong in that time. That doesn't mean you won't inevitably be saved for it. Otherwise, that line would be, that entire section would be a contradiction, right? The way that so many people say, oh, well, you can't be forgiven if you blaspheme against the Holy Spirit. It's like, no. What he's saying is you're either in accordance or you're not. Ultimately, you will be forgiven by me, the Savior, as many as we ever utter, as many things as we ever do wrong.
Like
however,
you saw the door
while you go wrong, you are wrong.
Yeah.
And that is something that you will be bound up within. And we all feel guilt and shame when we go wrong, right? We look at it backwardly and we're like, oh man, that was yucky, even in the moment. Like, if I'm sitting there, like, slapping a needle in my arm or, like, slapping my monkey or whatever, I feel kind of fucked up about it, right? And I'm like, damn, man, like, this sucks. But at the end of the day, like, I have to know I'm saved, you know? Like, it's like, man, I'm amongst matter, man. And the strong man was tied up, and that fucking sucks. You know, so he's trying to tell us about accordance. This whole section was about accordance. And he goes on to say, what is it to really have family and stuff like that? He's trying to speak to, like, what is real membership? It's being fashioned together. Who is here in present character? Like, Mark chapter 3 is a really good chapter to learn about accordance through. It's compounded in other areas, but I think it's one of the ones that really highlights accordance. It happens a lot. I mean, Matthew 7 was also one of them, but there are other things that he makes points of too, about like the nature of how goodness works and stuff, like with the parable of the sower and stuff. I mean, ultimately all these parables in the Gospels are like one big doctrine we're all learning in, but we have these sort of sub like columns, you know, holding up the whole structure. And yeah, accordance is the major column that I see in Mark 3. But I felt like that's really important to bring up, because if we look at the collective situation, that's one thing, but we also have to look at the individual thing. And we have to ask ourselves the qualifying questions. Who runs the house right now? Is it the thief or the strong man? Am I according with Christ or am I not? Am I acting as a Christian or am I acting satanic? Right? And that's a very important question that we have to ask ourselves. Anyhow.
I think that's pretty integral to the idea of the narrow path. It's like Christ says the path is narrow. And if you visualize the path as having visualize the path on a mountain and both sides are very steep. The path is narrow. Just to kind of like contextualize this idea, people question, well, how can God see all sin as the same when, you know, there are things like telling white lies and things like murder and rape? And it's like, well, like Tabor is saying, if you're in accordance, that means you're on the narrow path. And if you visualize the path as having steep sides on both sides, if you step off the path, no matter how far off the path you are, you're falling off the mountain. You're not on the path, right? So it's this idea of, well, you know, some things are worse than others, and you know, that may be true like on a human level. Like if I just tell a white lie on a human level, that's not as bad as murdering someone. But if you're not in accordance with holiness at the time, you are off the path and you're tumbling down the mountain. And you know, it's like you could think of it as some sins are easier, or some sins are stepping further off the path or tumbling further down the mountain, and it's gonna be more difficult to ascend back to the path. But in essence, if you're off the path, you're off the path, and the path is narrow. But it's also important to note that in this visualization, there's no gatekeeping the path. It's like God doesn't gatekeep the path. Yeah. He does say it is through me that you are saved, but there is no gate, and there are no walls on either side. It's like once you tumble off the path, you have that's the whole idea of being saved, is that you are given the chance to come back and continue the walk, you know?
Yeah, like the parable with the 100 sheep and the one sheep that got lost.
Right. Or the prodigal son. It's like, all right, you stepped off. You know, this is the concept of forgiveness. There's a holy forgiveness, which is universal. And then, you know, we can kind of break it down through the levels of, you know, you have the holy forgiveness, and then you have more of a like interpersonal human forgiveness where you know, it's like some things are a lot more difficult to forgive, and you may transgress against me to a point where I can forgive you, but I can no longer interact with you. Mm-hmm. But that's not how God views it. God doesn't say, well, you've done this and now I can no longer interface, you know?
Yeah.
That's not how it works. It's like, you know, you tumble off the path, it is open for you to come back and continue the walk.
But I mean, for us mortals, when someone hurts us so bad that, you know,
Right.
we can forgive them and say, hey, I'm letting it go, but like, I don't want to interact with you anymore. That's
Right.
because we are scared for our own safety, right?
Mhm.
We don't want them to hurt us, don't want them to hurt our families. And we just say, well, let's just judge back. I mean, that's why we have prisons, right?
Right, exactly. Yep, and there are still worldly, materialistic consequences to our actions.
Yes.
You know, it's like, unfortunately, we're not living in this this box where if we do something, it's contained within the box. It's like there are ripple effects outside of what we are doing.
Absolutely.
And that is also important to understand. It's like, you know, if you are someone who's living strictly for the world and you feel like everything is just a means to an end, you're gonna leave a trail of chaos, man. Like, you can see this throughout history, and you can see the insane historical tragedies that have happened as a result of people's ego or desire to conquer, or, you know, anything. And then you can even see it just personally. Everyone knows someone that has fallen really hard, man. Like my brother, that's a perfect example. I won't get like super into it, but he fell really hard, bro, and it ultimately cost him his life. And it's like that was a worldly result of those actions. And I do believe there is still a forgiveness for him on a higher level, but it's like I can forgive the things that he had done, but the worldly result is that he's no longer here, and there is a ripple effect, and that caused an insurmountable amount of chaos for me and my family at the time. But I don't know, do you want to talk about like more like Gnostic ideas?
Like which
Like
is on your mind?
the idea of like loosh farming,
Yeah.
and how what I would like to discuss is
What's
more
loosh
modern.
farming?
Modern. Robert Monroe was like a psychologist. He made an institute, and he came up with this notion.
Yeah, I've heard of him, a
loosh.
Monroe Institute, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
He came up with this idea called loosh because he studied all the, divine books and stuff,
Yeah.
right? And he found that it seems like there's this sort of transactional thing, and we can actually find it in the New Testament, not just the Apocryphon of John and the apocryphal type texts that might be considered Christian, but even in the canonical, like Ephesians chapter 6, for example, it's kind of one of those really hard to deny Gnostic sections for this sort of idea. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, dark powers in high places. And the principalities or princes, the word is archon in the Greek. It's the same idea of like arc whatever or arch whatever. Like we get this idea of hierarchy, right? The idea is there's this sense of higher and lower, and one of the things that are higher than us are these cosmological entities, almost like Lovecraftian old ones. They're archonic, they are cosmocrators, right? They are of cosmic scale. Weather, like for example, is one of those cosmocrators. It confines us, right? So there are these sorts of like Gnostic points of awareness about materiality, You asked before we started recording a question that I didn't really fully answer, and I think it's really important to make a more clear point of it now, is that I think a proper Gnostic view is not that materialism just bad, but it is where good and bad both are. It's a platform, so it's sort of neutral and good or bad, but ultimately it is bad, just like we are all bad, in the sense that we have all been lawbreakers. In the continuum of our entire existence, we've not been all good, and that's because we're material. Things go wrong where things are. Only things can go wrong. But God being a pure essence of existence, he is inextricably, it's like collapsing all time and space into this infinitesimally grand thing, both take infinitesimally small and infinitesimally large. That's the omni-qualities of God, the holy God. There's no way to constrain God by things. There's no measure, right? So that kind of being is something that you cannot hold a thing against. God is impassable, is the idea, right? There's no way we get over on God. So as much as God might know our pain and share in like understanding, he's ultimately beyond pain, right? And that's where we know salvation is. That's why like Christ like can go like into human life and die in human life and resurrect and provide a sense of true life. There's actually Greek terms for life that, like the English word life, two words get translated into life in Koine Greek. And I think they're really important. So psyche is the life that we have. It's not real life, it's not true life, but it is the life of the flesh, and it passes away. Psyche is conflicted. It is just like materiality in that way. It's the word that gets translated to soul, right? Soul and spirit being different. Souls aren't what we live for. We live for spirit, right? The Holy Spirit, right? And we recognize unclean spirit. It's the other breath. It's like a polluted breath or the good breath, right? We want good breath, right? Souls are sort of like the lungs, right? The lungs are on break apart, but they're on functionally deal with breath, right? So that's what psyche is. But the other word is Zoe, and that's the life of Christ. And that's true life, real life, life that does not pass away. It is real consciousness, the real vigor, the only place we ever derive any of this stuff that comes good from comes from Zoe life. In fact, in you have the Gnostic Gospels book. I don't know if it has it in there. I imagine it would. The Apocryphon of John, Zoe is actually a character. Like, it's one of the emanations of the Holy God is Zoe, which is like one of the things that Christ is like called equivalent with, and vice versa. Zoe is actually in the garden section of the Apocryphon of John, so you might find that there. Anyhow, just a little sub-reference, but yeah, just a little bit there. I mean, you wanted to speak more about other things there, but I just thought I would weigh in a little bit about a few things in context of the Bible.
So this Gnostic idea of like archonic entities, the term louche is supposed to be like the energy, like the life energy that they're draining from you, whether it's through actually it's not even just, it's just energy in general. Mm-hmm. So it can be from your suffering, it can be from extraneous pleasures, it can be your anxieties. It's both the good and the bad, but it's like the energy. So you've heard of like energy vampires, people who are considered like energy vampires. Mm-hmm. That's kind of like a real world. If you are to think of the archonic entities as like a metaphor, that's kind of like the real world application of what this means. It's like
Yeah.
the world is set up in such a way where people want your energy and they want your money and they want to get a reaction out of you and they want you to be emotional because it produces something for them. So anything that people are trying to take from you that's like the metaphor of the archons loosh farming you. And I think this kind of goes back to the concept of stoicism. If you are to prevent if you want to protect your energy, you can't get emotional. I think emotions are they can be illusory. They can be you can't trust your emotions during the minutia of everyday life. Like if someone says something that is offensive to you, people will harbor those things and it will ruin your day and it takes all your energy out of you. That's a perfect example. Or if just like the everyday things, someone cuts you off on the road and you're filled with rage, and that's just another thing. It's your life force being drained from you from just these tiny things. It doesn't even have to be something big. And
it's not that you shouldn't trust your emotions. It's that when you have an emotion, it's the question of, are you going to have that emotion and blindly follow it, or are you going to have that emotion and question it?
I think there are degrees of emotions. Reactionary emotions are something that you cannot trust. There's no trust to be had in these reactions that you have to everyday life. Obviously, if you lose someone you love and there's like a grief response, that's something that's genuine. But even still, it's like, there are people who will lose their immediate family members or even pets or a friend, and they carry with them that grief forever. And at some point you have to ask yourself, at what time do you make amends with the fact that this has happened and you can release that burden? At what time? Obviously there's a season for everything, as Ecclesiastes says. There's a season of grief and of celebration and of dancing and joy and all these things. There's a time to sow, there's a time to harvest, but there's a time in which you have to relinquish these things. You can't be carrying these burdens with you forever. And that's this loosh farming idea, man. It's like it comes at you in all kinds of ways. You get bad news. You think you're gonna get dude. Let me tell you, the worst feelings I've had are things that I think are going to happen. Yeah. And they never do. Those have been the worst parts of my life. Yeah. And it's like, were those ideas like somehow implanted in me in some way to drain my energy? Or do I feed it on my own because I'm expecting an outcome that I don't even know will happen? But yeah, man, worst, honestly, like the most depressed and like anxious I've been are like expecting things to happen that just never come to fruition.
You got a judo Waitiko,
What?
You guys know about Waitiko?
Uh-uh.
It's like the Native Americans believed in like this, basically like almost like equivalent to the Satan, except for it's not in the same sort of context that a lot of people think of it as Satan. Sort of a trickster deity. Basically, Waitiko is always there looking for that moment where you're going to like have a lapse in consciousness to sort of find you in foolery, right? One way or another. He's just going to make a fool of you. He's going to make a joke of you. He's playing jokes. He's sort of a prankster in that way. But he brings about all these like forms of iniquity and forms of suffering that are unnecessary, that just bog you down. Very loosh farmy, archonic type stuff right there. And it's interesting because I'll see like the little like traits of Satan or Waitiko or whatever doing these things, trying to like mold people into like bad ends. and I'll just like find my way out of like the traps. Like I'll be like, it's not that like me acknowledging these anticipations is a bad thing, but I cannot find myself getting manipulated into it or being like unconscious of it. Because like if I deny it, I bypass it one way or the other, where I either act as if it doesn't matter instead of like learning from the lesson, or I like find myself getting played, and I never bypass. So I just take it seriously and I go, okay, how can I accord and stay on that narrow path? That's the sort of question. But yeah, man, you got to judo with Tico, man, because you get the better of you if you're foolish, you know.
But it's these things, these kind of ideas within Gnosticism that even if you don't believe in the idea as being like real, it's still, everyone believes it, you know.
Yeah.
Like
it's functionally there.
Everyone understands that
there's things that take your energy.
Yeah, everyone understands that you know, the economy is set up in such a way where you're going to be inundated with advertisement. People want your money. You're going to be inundated with feeling inferior if you don't have X, Y, and Z, and that's going to cause some maybe even just low-level degree of suffering every time you wake up and you say, "Oh, I'm not meeting the ideal that the world has set into place." And it's once you, I'd love to discuss like the illusory aspect of the material world. Most of it is not an illusion in the sense that it's not real, but in the sense that what we are experiencing here in the material world is, it's like we see it in front of ourselves, but it's not actually what it is. So here's a good example. In terms of just like how we perceive things. So every day you see people, you know, on the road driving their cars, and let's say you have two different scenarios. You know, two cars pass you by. One of them is like an older like Toyota Corolla, right?
Yeah.
And we have a perception of what that person inside that car is immediately. Like we have this idea of maybe what they're like, what kind of job they have, what their financial situation is. We immediately come up with these ideas based on what we're seeing in front of us materially. And then they pass by and say a guy in a McLaren drives by a really nice Mercedes. And then we immediately have this idea of, oh man, he's like crushing it, bro. He's driving a Mercedes. He's like dressed nice. He looks like he's got his shit together. Probably owns a nice house. Probably goes on vacations and stuff. But that's the illusion. In real life, we don't know what is happening. We don't know if the guy driving the Corolla is super fiscally responsible and has $1 million in the bank, and the only reason he doesn't drive a nice car is because he doesn't want one to begin with. And the dude driving by in the Mercedes might be up to his neck in debt, and he's struggling to pay off his car payment every month, and he's losing his house.
Just trying to appeal to a vision.
And you can go even deeper than that. It's like all this behind the scenes stuff that we don't know. It's like this dude driving the car might be going through a divorce. He might have an addiction issue, and it's like these are all behind the scenes things that we are not aware of, and that is the illusion. And this is applicable to everything. It's like when you're out in public interacting with people, it's like you might meet someone and you get along with them really well, and it's like you have no idea about their past or what they're currently involved with, and they're not going to tell you. And that's the illusion, man. It's like we're set up in this system where we kind of like cover the truth in what we see before us. And really the truth is like, if we knew everything behind the scenes, the whole illusion falls apart, man. Even the idea of like modern conveniences, it's like the reason that we're functioning so well as a society and we're a polite society is because we wake up every morning and the lights turn on and our cars start and we have all these really nice conveniences, and we go to work and we make our money, and you know, we can buy cool things. And it's like, if we strip that all away, man, like, we are very animalistic by nature.
We'd probably be even more so because we're weak to not have things that we fashioned ourselves, right?
Right. Yep.
Like, we're not practicing what it's going to take to get by. We are just exchanging, you know, monopoly money
right.
for things, and it's great because they're really high quality. Like, these are nice sweatpants. They're kind of cheap, but they're also kind of nice, you know, when you think about it, for the exchange. Like, this is a great exchange. These are going to last me a while.
And it's like, you didn't have to make them.
And
then the illusion is some poor schmuck in Indonesia is cranking out 1 million of these every year. That's the illusion, man. And it's knitted in everything. And when you get down to the brass tacks of what is true and what is real, it's not always good. It's not always it's not always nice to uncover the truth. That's why the quote is like, you can't handle the truth. Because a lot of people can't, man. It's like, you know, it's like, if we all, like, to be completely real with each other right now, it's like, if all three of us knew every single thing that we have done on this earth, we probably wouldn't really like each other very much. You know, it's like, we can interface and have this dialogue, because there are a lot of things that are kind of hidden that Tabor won't disclose to me, and I won't disclose to you, and you won't disclose to, you know, and that's just how it is. And that is part and parcel how society is functioning. So it does kind of work both ways. It's like, another good example, it's like, if your boss knew everything that you've done at work and everything that you've said about him, it's like, would you still have a job?
Yeah.
Probably not. And then if you're in a relationship with someone, it's like, if they knew everything that you've said about them or thought about them, they probably wouldn't like you very much. But it to a degree, the illusion's necessary, so we can keep the machine running in a sense.
Well, because as humans, we can't forgive everyone fully,
right?
Because we're flawed in that way. You know, I can't. You might dispel everything that you've ever done to me, and like I don't have the power to forgive you for all those things. You know,
you're like caught off guard in the sequence of his confession. With like, oh man, you're despicable. I would never do that myself. But then all the other things that you found yourself having in common, you're like, yeah, I've been bad there too.
Well, that's because it's your own inability to even forgive yourself, and you're projecting that onto everyone else, to where you can't, like, I can't forgive you for what you've done because I'm trying to hide behind the things that I've done by basically alchemizing them into you. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. But yeah, it works both ways, just like everything. And we can get into like the duality of the world. Everything is predicated on duality.
Yeah, let's do the duality. We've been kind of marching around it like the whole time. We haven't really got, you know.
I'm gonna utilize my Chat GPT because if
you really want to talk about the illusion now,
right? The AI, that's a whole nother conversation. But this idea of duality, so it's composed of, you have one extreme and another extreme, and that's the case with basically everything. And you have the necessity for both to meet in the middle, and everything that is in duality consists of a cycle. So you have the sun and the moon, that's in a cycle. You have men and women who unify and create the cycle of life, which continues into the cycle of death. And then you have the seasonal cycles, which pertain to, you can even relate that to like agriculture. The seasons are required to keep things functioning properly in the world. Like if you remove the rain cycle, everything falls apart. If you remove the moon rising and falling, then everything falls apart. So it's two parts of the whole that are necessary to keep this whole thing functioning properly. And then all of these things also are both different and the same at the same time. So in alchemy, with the symbolism, you have the idea of the red king and the white queen. So the red king is the sun, and the sun is typically seen as a masculine symbol, like soul and sun, like SON. You know, it's the masculine symbol, and the sun is bright, and when the sun is out, you can see things clearly and you can organize and structure, and that's kind of how men work. They like structure and organization and forming hierarchies, and that's only possible if you can see what's in front of you. So if you can't do that if it's dark out, everything is kind of in chaos if it's dark out. So the sun pertains to masculinity, and then you have the moon, which is a softer light. Women are softer, but at night it's a little bit more convoluted, and I think everyone can agree that women are a little bit more hard to understand, and there's a little bit more of a chaos with that, and the moon is often characterized as being feminine, like Luna. It's that word is derived from like a feminine whatever word.
Goddess.
Yeah. So you have all these things that relate to each other. It actually helps you understand things a lot more. It helps you understand the functions of things. It helps you understand the functions of politics. So you have the left wing and you have the right wing. So it's two things. The ideal is that you meet in the middle. Conservatism, or like right wing, is considered the masculine. If you think about it, it's like most masculine men are more conservative than like traditional. Traditionality is considered like a masculine thing, and it's very much about structure and order, which is a very masculine trait. So if you're right wing, you're probably embodying more like masculine ideals. If you're left wing, it's a little bit more progressive. And what is progressivism? It's like looking forward.
Change.
It's change, and change is chaos. And the feminine is a little bit chaotic and emotional, and I'll probably get shat on for being misogynistic, but that's just the nature of women.
Well, it's cyclical, and like if you take like male female hormonal structures, right? The man, our hormones fluctuate throughout the day.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
For a woman, they fluctuate throughout the month, right? And that's exactly what the sun does. The sun rises and falls every day, day by day, the exact same.
Yep.
And the moon goes
As
into
a cycle.
A very monthly cycle.
Exactly. Right? Here's some. If you want to look at those, tarot cards are very like alchemical in their symbolism, and there actually is a lot to derive from like anyone that is listening. If you can read a book about alchemical symbolism and relate it to like the broader connotations of things, I think it helps you kind of like parse reality a lot better. It's helped me understand things a lot better. It's helped me understand the political climate and the chaos between the genders right now. It's like we have a struggle between progressivism and conservatism, and there's gonna be it's gonna move down the rungs of the ladder, and it's gonna start affecting individuals. And now men and women are having issues getting along because we have different ideas about things, how things are supposed to work. But if you understand duality and the idea that the ideal is these things coming together and functioning as a unit, and then the cycle is natural, and the cycle is it functions as it should. It doesn't have to be all this chaos. It's like if you knock the moon out of orbit, everything's gonna get messed up, man. And if you knock women out of orbit, like ideologically, it starts to mess everything up. I mean, same with men too, but it's like all these things are related. And to the materialist rationalists that we're just like evolved from ooze and everything is just the Big Bang. It's like if you really understand how quite literally everything is interconnected, there's no way to believe that this isn't some kind of design, that it was designed in some way. But I mean, you can believe it, but
I mean, I would even argue that the materialist atheist, that the most modern day Christians are just as materialist as that atheist.
And that's the problem with, I don't even like considering myself, I don't like calling myself a Christian, because I think the term Christian and Christianity has just been completely blasphemized. I don't think it means anything anymore. It's just like the default term that you use if you don't really know what to categorize yourself as.
You almost have to call yourself like with adjacent terms with it, like Gnostic Christian, Christian mystic. You almost have to say like yes, I venerate and respect and represent Christ, up to the point that I am conscious of, right? But like, yeah, if you just call yourself a Christian, people are going to come up with like one or another, or like they might have a few views and they're trying to box you into like, what kind of fundamentalist are you? And it's like, I might not actually share in any of those fundamentals, like barely at all. I find like this is, as much as like I'll talk with a Christian at church and I'll see holiness in them, and I can see like those that have studied deeper, like they get something, and like we have so many really awesome conversations. Whenever it comes down to like where they glaze over is in those moments where they're saying those doctrines I know to be false. And I used to be that person too, and I remember there would be a dissonance with what my heart was telling me in truth and what I was seeing, with the church and everything, and myself. I felt like I had to say this, I had to fit in, or otherwise, something's going to be wrong, something isn't going to make sense. I don't know, man, it's kind of unfortunate. Yeah, I figured we'd maybe talk about duality from a more cosmological point of view for a moment. I can kind of weigh in on that a little bit.
Absolutely.
So, duality, plurality, basically the same kind of thing. Or you could even call it particularity as another essence context to kind of understand it. Particles, right? Parts, things are particle, they're particular. We even call them political parties. Like, none of these words in language are ever, like, there foolishly. And I thought that may be, like, a really good way to contextualize, like, what I was saying earlier about, like, transcendence and immanence being, like, some of the aspects of God, some of the attributes of God, the Holy God, is, like, understanding that, like, the Holy God is truly universal, right? One word, right? Christ is called the Logos, right? It's where we get the word logic from, and yeah, like not that like just any form of logic is like an expression of divinity, but it is like on the path to divinity. Like talk about order, that sort of like masculine approach to God. Like no wonder why like this notion of Logos is so important. But yeah, when like, for example, Plato talked about the Logos, right?
Yeah.
He talked about like that inextricability between duality and the transcendence of God, right? So here's like this immanence of God, right? I-M-M-A-N-A-N-C-E, immanence, right? He is not bound by the things, but he is all involved in the things themselves, right? There's no way in which anything goes good without his involvement. Yeah, the rolling out, the flourishing, the evolution of things, if they are ever to go to a good end, it's by the involvement with holiness. So it's not that duality is evil itself, but it is blighted with evil. It is not wholly evil, but it is where all of evil is sort of rooted in. Evil isn't really maybe a thing. There's that whole idea, the discussion that it's a privation of good. I think that's a interesting perspective. I don't necessarily confirm nor deny it, because I think it's an important way to examine things, but I also have to wonder if evil is a thing in and of itself, like the amalgamation, that it's actually substantial. I also have to wonder about that too. So I kind of use both perspectives. I don't know, so duality, from a cosmological point of view, it's that, there is a division, a sense of separation, the persistent illusion that comes from that. It's a struggle. It's bound by senses. Duality is consciousness confined, right? And it's a struggle, at that point. It's challenging. It challenges us up to degrees. Why do we go through rites of passage? How do we organize and find order amongst the chaos, right? I mean, a lot of these, unfortunately, a lot of fundamentalists will, come against occultists and just write them off like they must be doing everything wrong. No, I don't think so. I would consider myself an occultist as well. That doesn't diminish from my Christianity, but enhances it. And my Christianity enhances my occultism. None of these things are broken up. So I guess the path of the adherent of Gnosis, or the one who's going to grow in wisdom of salvation, or however you want to phrase it, is somebody who's going to continue to integrate no matter what they learn. And I guess maybe talking about symbols, like Jake was saying, symbols, they're sort of just really one language and the truth of things. Now we have these systems, Chinese, English, whatever else, right? I think that it's kind of foolish to think that there are languages. There's just one language. It's just whether or not we have enough context to understand the message. There's one medium and one language, and all these things are speaking all the time. It's just that, are we comprehending? Are we witnessing? Or
you have
not?
ears to hear and eyes to see.
Right. Amen. And if we recognize that there's just one language, just as if there's only truly one God, there's the God of this world, right? It's a false vision of God. It's a constrained, dualistic, demiurgic kind of approximation. I'm witnessing an archon, a large cosmic length entity, but it isn't the true divine, right? It is a God, but it isn't the God, right? If we can recognize that there is one language, we can actually witness the patterns. He was speaking a lot about the dualities of the world, and they're important because they give us a sense of law and measure, but they're not the real thing. So symbols help us understand functions in the world, in duality, and that's why they're always composed of the things in it, and they can kind of help us toward the divine truth, but they aren't themselves it. Otherwise we fall into a form of idolatry or something. If I put up the eye of providence and I'm like, that's it, you know, I've kind of mistaken. I even think people do this, unfortunately, with Jesus. We understand that Jesus is a representation to divine truth, and we can create lots of parallels, and it helps us convey a really, really important message. Yeah. But if I was to look at Jesus as a man, and I think this is a really important thing. Again, you see all these Christians, he had to be a historical person that actually existed and actually died on the cross physically in time, as if there's only one timeline. Maybe we're actually in converging and diverging timelines, and this iteration of Tabor actually went over there, and You're talking with another one tomorrow, But I'm so similar, you would never know. I mean, how would you know, right?
Yeah.
So that's where we have to sometimes kind of pull ourselves back. So they'll do this with Jesus. Jesus, Christ's nature is one thing, and his man nature is another. And the theologians talked about this, right? But somehow with theistic personalism, they've made their I like to sometimes make fun of it, like South Park did, where it's they have the romance song and they just start putting Jesus in it, and it's love songs, right? And it's the same thing, my bestie Jesus or my boyfriend Jesus. Theistic personalism often has this pattern of language where the divinity of God is really constrained down to man, and it's okay, are we talking to the God nature? More like classical theism and getting to something higher and far more expansive and beyond the cosmos? Are we really speaking to that Gnostic epiphany, that Gnostic revelation? Or are you shrinking God down into, my feelings, it's like the feminization of the church, right? The same idea. I feel that's the compulsion that causes that. And I don't know, it's what is Jesus the man without the ground that he would walk upon? Because if I just take Jesus and I put him in an ethereal space, why does he even have feet then? What's the context here, right? Yeah. So if we're thinking of things of matters, we need matters amongst matters to contextualize each other. And then if we're thinking of the nature of God, then there's a pure ethereal space where, sure, those things also matter, but there's more matters than just the ones we know. There are greater depths of contexts that we don't even know. We would take that being to show us, right? So I think that's the sort of big shift of consciousness that truly awakened people will speak about, and that's where it's if we're going to understand duality, we recognize it's ultimately constrained. Just like Jesus in the parable that I mentioned earlier, he's in and of himself, Satan is divided amongst himself. He is the causer of conflicts, the causer of division. He is particular. He is dualism. He is plurality. Just like legion, we are many, right? That is unclean spiritual nature, whereas the holy God is one. And one isn't just one of many numbers. No, complete. The idea of oneness in and of itself is it's way more beyond one amongst two then, So there's plurality and one is just another number, and then there's oneness, and that's not appealing to just some new agey gobbledygook, man. That's some mystical stuff right there. We've pondered on these meditations for generations, man. Humanity is very enlightened. We are unlike every other animal around us. We comprehend, we might have a lot in common with them, but we comprehend things in ways that they clearly do not. A beaver and a bird might make nests and in banks and things like this, right? But we make houses and fridges and computers, man. There's something that is closer to higher consciousness and mankind, and that's not that we're diminishing from their involvement in the cosmos, but there is something special. So it's you said this earlier yourself, Greg, the Sky Daddy. It's we don't want to bring God down to a man, but we can understand that he's representational in the beaver and in the human in respects to what they are. There's a divine nature, how he emanates into them. And where am I trying to go with this? It's on the tip of my tongue.
It's you can see this manifest unity within all of the world, right? You can see all the intricacies, and when you're talking about the dualities and how everything fits perfectly like a puzzle, and if you take any piece out, it all just crumbles apart, because right now it's all one unified structure that all works perfectly within each other. And there's all these forces in our society that are trying to, I guess, pull those structures apart and disentangle them and cause chaos and disruption and division, right?
And then we can see that going back to the one language point, and like the language of symbols and stuff, right? There are patterns in our languages. Here's one of the examples. One of the first times I ever really spoke with Jake, we did it at a table. I did this with my friend Austin. I'll just like say it in person, just verbally. We have like the word pattern and we have the word like matrix, right? So patterns, like we see patterns in the sky above. We call it Father Time. We have like the zodiac as a sky clock, right? Mm-hmm. And the sun and the moon. These are forms for time telling, right? And we knew like there's order above us, and then we look at all this kind of entropy down here, and we like called this matter, right? And matter and matrix and mother, mate, these are all words that have to do. Like I mate with her, she's my mate, because she's the mother. Mater is mother. It's just but then pattern, pater, it's also pope, pope, papa, right? We have all this patterns, Mother Earth, Father Sky, right? So like there is a sense of like the Sky Daddy. It goes way back into all these different faiths, but there's like one pattern in all these different faiths. And if we can just understand, like there's a sort of like, again, these things can help get us toward the truth, but they're not representations on their own, like, oh, I'm just going to worship just the mother or just the father, right? And that's one of the things sometimes I've noticed is like there is a feminine counterpart in the biblical text.
Well, that's the Holy Spirit, right?
Yeah, and it's not just in the Hebrew, it's also in the Greek, but somehow they want to take what is feminine and make it neutral, neutered. I mean, like it's in the language. Like if you study linguistics, there's like gender in language, right? So there's neutered, like you neuter a dog, neutral. Yeah. And
that's a whole English language.
And masculine, yeah. And it's in all these languages. And we're really, again, talk about the division, just trying to tear these things apart instead of seeing how they work all in fashion holistically. A lot of the times it's almost like we're trying to keep people ignorant. Man, that is one of the saddest things. If anybody ever is trying to keep you from gnosis, if you're not able to study something to fullness and come out with greater depth of understanding, there's a controlled situation there where somebody knows and they don't want you to know so they can have power. And you were speaking about power earlier, power and symbols and representations. These texts are so powerful for meaning, right? And there are so many different words that get juxtaposed, but I found it in all the languages I've ever studied to any degree. I've gotten to a point where I can see it's all there and I don't need to know it all, but I'm very like rewarded to know that it's there. And as much as I ever learn, I could just continue to learn deeper, and I'm satisfied with that like I have keys to unlock doors. But I also like look at the average person in the common public and they don't even know a fraction of this stuff, and it's like I was that person once upon a time. I don't know why. Like, why is it that some people, they just get it so much more? Like, we're doing this podcast because we're all relatively more awakened, but some people need to hear it, and yet they won't even have like the will to do it. And it's like the dissonance is such a struggle, and like we shouldn't be like disheartened by that. Like, it's a call to continue to be like, hey, listen to this, look at that. It's all going to like work out to your benefit, to your Gnostic revelation. But at the same time, it's like, what you like, Jake has asked this question so many times too. What is the catalyst, man? Like, why can't I just throw a key their way and they receive it? It's like you put the key in their hand and they're just like, they're like a dog that won't take a treat and it just slips, and you're like, eat the freaking treat, I'm trying to reward you. You know, they just don't do it. You know, it's one of the funniest things sometimes. It's like what we wish and what happens. there's that dissonance that goes back to just the program has people sometimes, and you can't push it any faster. You lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. We go back to those old, wisdom statements, and we just find peace in it anyway. No matter what I suffer, it's like, I'm just glad to be as relatively awakened and find people amongst me. That way I'm not just isolated with this genius, because it would be freaking difficult if I didn't have people like you to talk to. I've been there. I've been isolated. It's like you go stir crazy, because you're like, it's like cabin fever. It's like you got all this up in the house.
Yeah, you're scrawling all your notes down. Like, does anyone else think like this?
I think I'll leave off. I'm gonna have to call it, but to kind of piggyback off what you were saying about why people get it, why some people don't get it. It kind of factors into the idea of, I think there are gold nuggets to take from Taoism and Buddhism, and I think something that is pretty sophisticated that relates to those concepts is like the wheel of samsara. So we're stuck in the wheel of death and rebirth. I don't necessarily believe in physical reincarnation, but I do believe that there is some kind of like recurrence that we are experiencing, and in order to escape that, Buddhists will call it nirvana or enlightenment. The Gnostics will call it the gnosis, and there is something to be said about how do we escape this cycle, and how do we prevent ourselves from this recurrence? How do we get out of this? I think there is a lot to be said about the concept of this physical realm is like a prison. We're in like this prison planet, and there has to be some kind of escape, right? There has to be. Otherwise, it's literally hell, like an eternal hell that we just keep reoccurring. And you could think of it as like, maybe our catalyst was previous generations. For me, it could have been my parents, because I was raised at least with some kind of like spiritual background. Maybe it's the experience of going through life, and those who don't get it, maybe they're going to be reborn in some way, maybe not physical, but maybe in some spiritual way. They're going to be reborn into the cycle, and they're going to be given another chance, and maybe the experience on this next iteration will catalyze something, and they can come to the knowledge.
And that's right where we cut off one more time. I want to thank everyone for listening to this. Tabor and Jake are very thoughtful individuals, as you can see, and they have nuanced beliefs on Christianity. And that's why I wanted to have them on the show, as we're doing this gospel series, to kind of dive into different aspects of Christianity in between each episode in interview form. All right. Take it easy, everyone. Thank you for listening.